Good evening. It is Monday, September 18th, 2023 at 5 p.m. I call this meeting to order. Item 2, review and discussion of proposed amendments to section 94-151 of the City of Fort Atkinson Municipal Code relating to the use of all-terrain vehicles on city streets.
Okay, so in your packet, you have a couple items. You have just a cover memo from staff. You have a draft ordinance, which I will go through a few things on that in just a moment, and then you have some additional information kind of getting us, bringing us back to speed as to where we are. So the council first, the ordinance committee reviewed this on July 6th. The full council held a workshop on August 15th. And now we are back with a draft ordinance and another full council workshop here. So I will just go through a couple of the areas that have changed in the draft. On page 2, we added a couple sections 34706, that whole line, it's the 4th row down. Those have to do with the restrictions on lamps. So that 34706 sub 3 is relating to the colors of the lamps, lights. So
I'm sorry, I'm not seeing the section here.
so on page 2 of the ordinance,
Okay, got it.
so on page 2 of the ordinance, right at the top there, where it's listing a bunch of
Got it.
sections of state statutes.
Okay.
So
And
So that's the state statutes that are being referenced.
Right.
Okay.
And
That's,
it references what? White light for the front, red light for the back? I'm assuming when you're talking about it, one of these is talking about light colors.
yes, so this first one is talking about light colors. No other color other than white or amber visibly from the front, and then red on the rear, and no flashing. So it just references the statutes when it comes to those lights. The next one is stop lamps, same thing, referencing statutes. The next one is, let's see, mufflers. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, okay. I missed one. The 34706 is requiring the lamps and reflectors. 34707 is the colors. 34714 is the stop lamps, and 34739 is mufflers. And then 34748 is the child safety requirements. So those are the state statutes that we've incorporated into this ordinance through that one. The next section on page 3, section 94-154, that hasn't changed. We still have 18 years of age in this, but that is something that I think the council may want to discuss a little bit more. So I'm just drawing attention to that one. On page 4, sub G, that's the hours of operation. So I think the council may want to discuss that one as well. And then I has been added, and that is that no operator shall operate ATV, UTV so as to cause the tires thereof to squeal, horn to blow excessively, motor to race excessively, or by emitting unnecessary and loud, excuse me, there's a typo there that I have to correct. Loud muffler noise. Moving on to 5, K has been added. That is referencing groups of 25 or more shall notify the police department. L has been amended to reflect that exception for public parking lots that was discussed at the last workshop. And M has been amended to require that individuals have and provide proof of the insurance that M was already requiring And then I just wanted to point out two other items of note, and that is the penalties section. I know we had discussed penalties briefly at the last workshop. That is in 94-159. And it indicates in addition to the other penalties in state statutes, it would be between not less than 50 and not more than $200 for a violation. And then that sunset provision that and the review on page 5 there. So that is the we would provide staff reports every 6 months after the effective date of the ordinance, provided that it is adopted, with including any sort of violations or calls stemming from the use. And then it would be automatically repealed within 2 years unless action is taken. And we would put some, an agenda item on, we'll put a tickler on our, my Outlook that would have us put something on the agenda a good probably 3 months prior to that for new discussion of that. So with that, President Johnson, I will let you kind of go through anything you want to go through, and hopefully we can find some consensus on some of those issues that people have issues with.
Well, I'm gonna make a couple of assumptions that we've all read this enough to be comfortable with parts of it. I guess I'd be looking for anyone who's got a part they're uncomfortable with to speak up.
Yeah,
Go
thank
first.
you.
You can go first, second, and third if you wish.
Well, I, as you can probably guess from the last time we talked about this, like the jury's still out with me. I'm not sure that this is the way to go. My starting point is in line with city staff's position and of the police chief, and then, but I'm happy to participate in the discussion of creating an ordinance that ultimately may or may not come before the full council. Fair enough for that? Okay. So bear with me if my printed copy of this, it doesn't match up with the latest one in here, because I was just using this from my notes from the last time. First of all, and I do not mean to be a pill in this process, but with on the first page, the second whereas paragraph, I'm not entirely comfortable saying that we've given due consideration to the recreational and economic value. I'm also not comfortable that that it sort of feels like we have had a discussion about some of those other things that are called that are spelled out in there, weighted against possible dangers, the public safety, the liability aspects, the terrain involved, and density and traffic. That feels like this is boilerplate language that was pulled from another ordinance and sort of inserted into this one. I don't feel like we've given anywhere near enough consideration to some of the things that are spelled out in there. I would be more comfortable ultimately if we just struck that paragraph altogether. And I don't know, what purpose it serves other than perhaps the first municipality or one of the early adopters of this. It sort of made them feel good that they did thoroughly analyze the economic value of something like this. They did look at the liability aspects and the safety and the other things that are called out in there, because it feels to me like we've sort of just, I wouldn't even say glossed over those. The safety aspect was made pretty clear by the police chief. The safety aspect is also the lack of safety, I guess. The ATV Safety Institute, which says these aren't safe for ATVs aren't used for safe for use on city streets, should not be used on city streets. They're for off-road purposes. Stuff like that makes me feel like I don't know, I'm not comfortable with the paragraph that says we've weighed these things, and after doing that, we're comfortable moving forward with an ordinance.
I'd be curious, did you read any input as to the Safety Institute that you're describing? When was their report generated?
It's on their website right now. I don't know. I haven't, I did go check it out after before our last discussion. And so I don't know if anything has changed in the most recent, since we
know
met last.
One of the issues that's been brought up here is the tires, and they have dramatically changed. And they're higher pressure. A lot of people are running actually street tires with designed for the street. Beyond moving in those directions, I'd be curious as to what Safety Institute says that were they designed for this? No, they were designed for off-road. I'll grant that. But they were designed with the most traction, most ability to hold the trail that they were on and be safe doing that. It fails in my mind to assume that because they're on a street, they become unsafe. And the tires, the guys running road tires, they're dealing with any noise issue. They're dealing with, mostly, I think they're probably also being a little selfish because it's their pocketbook that is not so much that the tires not designed for the road. The road's not designed for the tires. It chews them up. If you want to ride the normal stock tires on it, you're going to spend a lot of money on tires regularly. If you do a lot of riding, you will do that. I don't think we glossed over it to anybody. Is it some of it's perspective?
Okay, I'm not an engineer. I'm only going to go based off of what someone who's more close to these machines are than I am. And when the ATV Safety Institute says to not operate these on public roads, that's an important opinion to me. And then also like just the references to the recreational and economic value. I mean, we've even heard from the president of the Half Mile Club from last time that there's no data to support that. I mean, it might be anecdotal that you go around and ask a few businesses. Well, what do you think? Is this going to be a benefit to your business or not? And some may say yes. And I've talked to a few business owners in town who have said, well, first of all, I don't want them. I don't want ATVs and UTVs on our streets. But I don't suspect that it will have any benefit to my business. So,
As far as economic benefit, I have seen a brochure and it was quite well done. I'm not sure who generated it, but it might have been the city of Monroe. They have a trail that's 60 miles long and encompasses just kind of a straight shot through multiple different cities to one destination and then back to Monroe. And that was gauged and it was felt that it generated $15 million a year on positive revenue along that trail with the things that they do spend: gas, food, beverage, lunch. Those things to me all strike me as more, where's the negative in one of our businesses selling Frosty Freeze, selling an extra ice cream? Where's the negative to one of our restaurants selling breakfast to a group that wanted to go out and enjoy themselves on one of these? I don't see a negative financially to it.
well, I think I don't know that there's a negative. I think it assumes that same group of people would not go to Frosty Freeze, would not go to the grocery store, would not go someplace else in town if they weren't able to use their ATV. Now, with respect to a Milton or a Monroe study that there's a extended trail system that they can access, like I haven't heard the closest trail to us. There's no direct connection, so there would be a lot of work that would need to be done to connect a trail system that someday may or may not provide an extensive economic benefit.
Again, I'm not trying to be a nitpicky fighter with you, Devin. I'm just trying to devil's advocate, so to speak.
Fair enough.
That I don't believe Monroe got connected to this trail and then said, well, let's have ATVs. I think they let ATVs come and it generated a reason to create the trail, a reason to create more things to do with them, a reason for more positive economic impact.
If I just may interject here, we only have this room until 6:30. So we have a hard stop. So I think that I think the debates of the merits of whether or not Whether or not ultimately this is adopted by the city council, maybe need to happen maybe at a city council meeting. So this workshop, I think we need to discuss specific aspects of this ordinance that would be in draft form. Then the city council would discuss and debate the merits of this ordinance in a different meeting setting. So right now, what I need from this meeting is enough information from this council to put together a draft ordinance that would be on an agenda for debates of the merits of the ordinance.
So would, if we just struck that second paragraph, the second whereas statement, does it change anything with?
It does not.
And
So
I'll get-
that would be my preference, or at least to somehow pull some of the things out of there, because I'm not sure. I mean, I'm still not comfortable saying that following due consideration of the recreational and economic value and weighing it against, city streets, dangers and health.
So those recitals are
yeah.
just simply kind of set the stage. They're a little
Right.
bit, they don't get enacted in our code of general ordinances with the rest of the language. They're just there to provide some context, basically. So we cannot have any recitals prior to the actual language in the ordinance, as this council has seen in other ordinances. So I think let's maybe discuss the actual language. So I can have some direction in that regard.
Yeah, if I may, I'll just offer the first one here. Item number G, it mentions operating vehicles between dusk and 9 a.m. The term dusk, whether it's one that changes every day as, we go around the sun and whether it's cloudy, I think creates some gray area. I would prefer that it was limited to actual specific hours. Looking at some of our neighboring communities, I would propose not operating on city streets between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m.
Hey, Councilman Schultz, I'm glad you raised this one because this was one that was of concern to me too. I not saying I'm completely sold on what's being proposed, but I think if we are going to move it forward, based on some of the discussions we had at the previous workshop, I would think it makes sense to have those operating hours similar to other communities around the area. Especially given that I think we've come to the consensus, we can't do like I don't think we're going to do like a local registration of ATVs and UTVs to operate on our streets. So I would think it makes sense from a traffic standpoint to have them similar to other communities that surround us.
I think that along with Koshkonong being, they intertwine so much into the city of Fort, there gets a lot of, well, if we jump a street, now all of a sudden we're out of compliance. It'd be easier for the city police, the sheriff's department, other municipal or enforcement agencies that, because like I said, all the communities surrounding us are basically that 10 p.m. to 5 a.m.
I'm not quite certain that it is. I did go and check all of the links that were provided to the different jurisdictions around us. While I would say, at least probably looking at them over here, half have that 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. Some are 6 to 10, some are 8 to 10. Others don't specify it. And some have different ones based on Sunday through Thursday or Friday and Saturday. So there is a little bit of a discrepancy in terms of hours you can operate. It is, I think it would be a generalization to say that 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. It would be uniform.
I probably is not uniform statewide, but it's uniform in Jefferson County enough to say that our bordering communities and our bordering townships have that for an hour.
Yeah, I don't know.
Jefferson does not. Jefferson is 8
right.
to 10 p.m. But
they
on the
did-
next review, they're gonna change it. It's gonna go to 5 a.m.
Do we know what Kashkanang's hours are?
5 to 10.
Okay.
Or 10 to 5, however you want.
And that's the closest other jurisdiction that we share border with. And that's why I just kind of threw out the 10.
Oh, sorry.
But, and I think just, again, there's a sunset built into this, which I don't know if I'd feel comfortable, backing this without that sunset, because I think there is this is a very contentious item. So we'd still have the opportunity, like if we determine that maybe those hours are inappropriate or no longer in alignment with, the area, that we could change it at one of those, benchmarks, I guess, or.
Definitely.
I have a question for the chief. Do you know if an ordinance doesn't specifically spell out hours of operation, what is the, what in effect are the hours? It'd be what? Yeah.
Chief, is your mic on? Sorry, there's people on Zoom that want to hear you.
Apologize, I don't think mine was.
If there isn't a restriction on hours, then there are no restriction on hours. So you could do 24/7.
So there are some that I couldn't find. Maybe I'm not reading the ordinance right, but I went through the City of Lake Mills and Town of Lake Mills, hours weren't specified. Town of Jefferson, hours of operations weren't spelled out as far as I could find. Jefferson right now is 8 to 10, Farmington 6 to 10. So there is Village of Sullivan, 5 AM to 9 PM Sunday through Thursday, 5 AM to 11 PM Friday and Saturday. So I guess I just point out that there is a lot of variation right now in the surrounding and even moving further beyond just the townships that are contiguous.
Communities differ because some communities don't have schools, some communities don't have rush hour traffic, they don't have the volume of traffic we have, so I think whatever you decide to put into your ordinance, you need to take into account, like, what is the purpose behind restricting hours and times? Is it focused on is it focused on what's best for the type of community that we live in?
So, sorry, if it just the interpretation of dusk would be whenever sundown is, which obviously
I think
moves each day.
I think the spirit of that language is that it's probably not best to have ATVs, UTVs that are lighted, not the same as vehicles in all 4 corners, to not be operating after dark, because it becomes even more dangerous then. I think a lot of ATVs, UTVs have inconsistent lighting that doesn't align with, NHTSA traffic standards, heights, brightnesses, where they're mounted on the vehicle and how they aim down the road. In a car, they're aimed at a certain angle, so not to blind the drivers coming at them. I think you have a lot more to think about than just, we don't care what type of vehicle it is and what the lighting is, as long as it's white in the front and red in the back and they shine and light it up. I think you as a city council need to really pay attention to all the fine details and how this impacts our community. And this is a great example of just this small part of lighting and hours of darkness and how that impacts the community.
I mean, I think the police chief is making a fair point. I think in general, I mean, we all have to realize we're all kind of finding our way through the weeds on this. This is a newer type of thing. It reminds me of a handful of years ago when we looked at passing a vaping ordinance, because vaping had become really popular, and we just wanted to make sure that stayed out of our schools. I think in general, that's why we were looking at that. So, I don't think no ordinance is going to be perfect. There's certainly going to be opportunities for changes. Like Councilman Schultz, I think one reason I'm slightly more comfortable looking at this is that we do have that 6-month review set in here and that 2-year sunset, where we can say at the end of it, this has been a great thing for our community, we want to continue, or if it's been a big hassle and it's been very problematic, we can choose to let it sunset and be done with it. So I'd be comfortable to the point that I think Councilman Lesko here is getting at in terms of the operating hours, maybe 5 a.m.'s too early. Maybe we'll look at a little bit later time, like a 7 a.m. or something like that, 8 a.m. maybe.
Only thing,
just-
I did talk to a lot of like city staff members that work at like DPW or utilities. They would like be able to ride them to their employment during the summers. And a lot of them start at 6 a.m. or a little earlier. So that would kind of eliminate them from being able to ride.
I would also think that there would be sportsmen who would want to go hunting or fishing with their UTV for just the total ambiance of the package, and they would be doing a lot of that 5 a.m.
True.
And when it comes to four corners lit, that's an aspect I would never have considered. Mr. Bump is correct. However, my motorcycle is not lit on four corners, so I'm not exactly sure that I'm terribly concerned with that four corner lighting.
And maybe it'll be like when I used to live on West Sherman, I had a neighbor around the corner who owned a Harley and he would fire it up at 5:30 in the morning, and it was really annoying, but it was part of living in the neighborhood too. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that takes me to item I, like, loud muffler noises, like what? I guess my first question, do we have any other sort of like ordinance related to noise? Or I don't know how to phrase it, creating a disturbance that would also kind of blanket cover this, or we don't have like a decibel reader in our patrol cars. I mean, granted, there's some apps on the phone, but I don't know how well calibrated those are. But it doesn't seem like, how can you hold people accountable to what loud muffler noises is without something a little bit more quantitative? Is there a way we could clarify that language?
I would just point out, we do not have a noise ordinance in this city, do we?
We have loud and unnecessary noise as a traffic violation.
But there isn't like a set decibel rating. in
I don't
that.
know if it says in there, but I believe ATV, UTV is through the DNR.
90
does have a
decibel.
Set decibel rating.
Yeah.
But
Is that from
So-
the manufacturer?
Yes.
yeah, I think that's reasonably a
That's
thought
why
that
people will modify from stock. I
That-
think that's where we are more focused or worried.
some of the motorcycle stuff that I'm aware of, if you buy it in its factory, it's legal, including a Harley, which is loud. However, if you buy something else or a Harley and add things to make it louder yet, that part's illegal when you shift it from factory to aftermarket for the pure noise of it.
So I can just give some context as to where that exact language came, and that is the exact language we have in section 58-73 in our disorderly conduct section of the city ordinance. So this is a different section of the ordinance, so that is why we mirrored that language. So it could be a disorderly conduct ticket to operate a motor vehicle so as to cause the tires thereof to squeal, the horn to blow excessively, the motor to race excessively, or by emitting unnecessary or loud muffler noises.
Cars would qualify for this too, would they not?
That's currently in our ordinance for motor vehicles under disorderly conduct. So this language just reflects that.
Sure, and the police write tickets for that now, though. I mean, if you have your motorcycle or if you have your car, for instance, with the Harley Davidsons, if they remove the baffles, typically the officer is going to know that. There used to be an officer in town who'd stick a broom handle up the muffler to see if there's any resistance, and then he'd write the ticket. But whatever the judge is going to accept would be, guilty of that. But I suppose you could modify an ATV the same way you could modify a motorcycle muffler.
Okay,
I'm not sure
Yeah,
we got.
I'll put my
consensus.
concern on hold then, if we feel like, if this matches other language and we believe it's enforceable, I'll put that aside.
I think Fort should get round to looking at a noise ordinance, I have had a personal encounter with a noise ordinance and our local police department where I was in Janesville. I lived on a cul-de-sac. My neighbor called me and said the police were just at your house. And I said, really? Okay, thanks. He said, I thought you'd want to know. So I called the police department. I asked, you're at my house. Can there something I can do for you? And they said, yep, your neighbor is complaining that you're in the backyard making owl noises. To which one I went, are you kidding me? They said, nope, if there's a noise complaint, we got to appear. So I mean, Fort should maybe consider one. I mean, one of those, you know. But we, at this point, we have such a vague noise.
My general understanding, and this goes back to when we've talked about having outdoor music performances in the downtown area, we have tried to not get too specific with some of those things, because one person's idea of a loud noise might be my idea of it's just everyday background, you know? So I think this is a part that we shouldn't get too
Okay.
lost in personally.
Being that the state statute already does lay it out 90 decibels, that gives a really nice baseline to start with.
Okay.
I want to make sure that we got the, or we provided the feedback we needed to on the hours of operation. Some question of whether dusk to 9 AM or going to, what maybe half of these jurisdictions on the list that we was provided to us have. I would go back to the safety component of this. There's good reasons, as the police chief points out, to have language that may be a little hard to pinpoint what dusk is, but every day you could, if dusk is considered when the sun sets, most of us can find out on our phone every day when the sun sets. There's probably other, are there other laws where we set a time frame of from dusk to dawn, what we used to hear? And
I'm not really sure if we have any current ordinances. Off the cuff, I'm not really sure.
I mean, it's to me, it's easier to look at my watch and say it's 4 o'clock, it's 10 o'clock, it's whatever the time is. Dusk changes every day. Dusk is different every single day of the year.
it is, and sometimes at 4:30, that can be the dangerous time when there's not any daylight at 4:30 PM.
And weather can affect that as well.
Or other times throughout the day. Yes, like, right, it, in the summertime, sun comes up earlier. I'm not sure. Did we agree that we are going to go to what about half of those on the list that we have here, have specified for their hours?
From 5 till 10?
I believe that would be a good starting point. Like Eric said, 6 months, we can look at it.
I'm more comfortable with a time frame that's similar to the communities around us than not.
And I, right with Mason, and that to my knowledge is 5 to 10.
Except for the city of Jefferson right now, which is 8 AM to 10 PM, and they may be moving towards that, but it's
They're
not right
not
now.
today.
Their original purpose for that was to make sure it didn't start until after school was started and in session. Because they wanted to avoid high schoolers driving them to school.
And there's some
Kids driving them to any of the schools they were in.
very valid point.
So, okay, we've got the age limit of 18. Do we get any feedback from the school district on, I guess, maybe we're not at that point yet, but I mean, like I've seen the high schoolers drive tractors to school. Yeah, and granted, it's the tractor is slower than ATV, I get it, but
Tractors that are legal to drive.
And I've seen some drive snowmobiles in the winter to the school.
Are they, I'll just ask, are they allowed to drive a motorcycle to school?
If you're
If
16
you're
with a
16,
motorcycle
you can have a valid
permit,
License.
that's kind of a concern I had, you know, if we're saying you're 16, you can drive a motorcycle, you can drive a car with a license. If, you know, as long as we have the provision in there that you have to have a valid driver's license, I think 16 would be a fair shot too.
And
And that's all the other communities around us also have that 16 clause. I don't think I saw any with the 18.
And I think there's still some question about what is enforceable and what is not enforceable too. So if you can right now, I'm not certain, I think the village of Sullivan allows 12-year people who are 12 years old to operate. But I don't know if it calls, or maybe it's the town of Sullivan, if they have, if they're accompanied by a parent, guardian, or someone with a valid license. So
And
again,
that's,
we're different, we are different. Some are 12, some are 16. We're suggesting 18.
Well, we're writing this ordinance. Can we not eliminate that with this ordinance? You've gotta be, no operating inside city limits under 16 or under 18. I'm comfortable with under 18 and under anyways, only because I don't want to screw this opportunity up for the city over that when with one of our sunsets, we could look at it, review it, and widen that up to 16 because we're not having troubles.
Well, I think we can pick and choose. I mean, that's what I'm hearing is we'd like to pick and choose whichever elements of other ordinances may most agree with whatever viewpoint you bring to this discussion, and then sort of push some others aside.
What was the 18 age? I mean, I would certainly think it should be at least 16. I mean, to me, that's common.
I wouldn't go
That's
anything
common
less.
sense. Was there a reasoning for putting 18 in the draft ordinance? Are there other communities that are doing that? Is it just? I mean, there's some, I'll say it, there's some 16 and 17-year-olds that are very responsible, and there are some that are probably not.
That would apply to 40-year-olds too. No.
It could. I mean, I'm just wondering if
I
there
would
was a-
prefer 16, but if they're not gonna make or break this deal up, that's the issue that doesn't.
I'm just wondering if there was specific reasoning for.
I think you want to
Choosing 18.
avoid these showing up at schools. And I think you also want to. I mean, we already know that ATVs on the road aren't safe, so let's put some immature, inexperienced drivers in them on top of it. They'll be great. I think that's a good idea.
Well, is there information down that path from any of the other cities or whatever that have allowed this use? Have they had some major uprising in traffic accidents like that? Have they have major safety problems? Have they have major behavior problems? Are there school systems saying?
I don't research, I haven't done any research into ATV, UTV use because I don't support it. So I don't have those answers for you.
Look, I pulled this from an article that was in the State Journal on August 23rd, and it had some accident statistics in there, and this is from the state DNR. So in 2022, there were 129 ATV crashes, resulting in 13 deaths and 124 injuries. And in that same year, there were 103 UTV crashes, resulting in 131 injuries and 8 deaths. So those numbers don't sound like they're not huge numbers. You'd like to see 0 injuries, but that data tells to me is that when there is a crash, when there is an accident, there's a high likelihood that somebody is getting hurt, perhaps badly and even fatally.
I have entertained what you're discussing there with the Mr. John Drake, the fellow that I brought in to talk to us the other day. And he said that those stats are also, he was rattling off the numbers, but the amount of those deaths, the majority of those were off-road use. We're not looking at authorizing off-road use that already exists. We're talking about on-street use, where it's on street versus off-road. Safer on the street. We're not driving through, around trees, down paths, up hills, through mud. I think on the city street, again, we still have a safer aspect of it. Again, it's perspective. I don't think that because there was an accident and somebody died in it, could it, the comparison, I'd like to hear more of a UTVs have 5 times as many as motorcycles. I don't see a comparison like that out there.
Maybe I made a note incorrect note, but the DNR warden who was at the ordinance committee said at that point that they had 14 fatal incidents so far this year. And I believe he said a lot of them are on roadways.
So you have the 2023 off-highway vehicle fatal accident summary as of September 7th in your packet for this meeting. So, and that has whether they are on road or off road. So that's in your packet.
I think if it helps move the discussion forward, I'd be more comfortable leaving it at 18 for now than taking it down.
That would eliminate school issues.
For the most
Being off
part.
the road at 10 o'clock also eliminates being on the road at bar time, which we wouldn't want to promote. You know.
For now, I agree with 18.
We can always revisit it, one of the sunset periods where we're looking at, do we continue this? Are we having problems with it?
Yeah, I mean. We're the full council. I mean, I don't think we're gonna come up with something that makes everybody happy. I'm personally still not completely decided on this, but I don't want to get into a situation where we just keep talking this to death. Workshop after workshop, meeting after meeting. I think at some point this is going to have to come into a city council meeting and go for an up or down vote, and either it gets passed or it doesn't.
I agree. For us to hash over the same talking points repeatedly doesn't get us anywhere.
Did we settle on a time frame though? Like, I guess as we're like 10 PM, I think we're all in agreement for that as cutoff. I don't know if we've all come to an agreement on the start time.
I would prefer it to be 5 AM. I honestly think that there's several reasons that with our neighboring communities, most of these starting at that and make it easier.
The county
so-
ordinance itself
and-
starts at that.
And I can't believe that the number of people get up at 5 AM just to ride their thing to drive around on it are immense. More likely people, like you said, that would get up that early morning, ride it because they could actually utilize it to go to work.
Drive through Whitewater, the Chinook process. Most of the time during the summer, driving through there, I've seen 3 to 4 sitting in their employee parking lot of employees driving them to work during the day. So I think that's just one thing, a lot of people would like to be able to, when they start shift at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, be able to ride to work.
Just for the record, then I would just like to state that I would be more comfortable if we were to go forward this with leaving the original dusk to 9 AM language in place.
I don't like using dusk or dawn. I think those are vague. It feels like old fashioned terminology to me. I'm thinking like something like 7 AM. It's kind of where I'd be at. I think 5 AM is kind of early. I think 7 AM is reasonable. That's my opinion.
But
I think, just to try and follow with the neighboring communities is my biggest standpoint, being how Koshkonong intertwined so much. You get people that, I'm just going over here and now didn't realize I'm crossing city limits, getting to there.
and I
Or
prefer to wonder what between 5 AM and 8 o'clock or 5 AM and 7 o'clock, what feature makes that so much worse?
Yeah, I don't know that I don't know that it's the best public policy to allow or to consider what other municipalities have done and make something that we're trying to put in place conform to that. So yeah, I'm not sure where you go with that. I mean, I keep coming back to the safety thing, and maybe that becomes a moot point if we strike the language about that we've considered the safety aspect of this and we're still comfortable going forward.
I would like to make make you comfortable if the striking the language achieves the goal, because we're not holding our hand up and going, I have researched this. Okay, fine, strike that. I'm fine with that.
I think too, maybe, you know, there's time to get into the discussion more, when, if and when this comes before the whole council, but like, since the last discussion we've had, I have had a number of conversations, maybe 15 to 20 with people outside of these chambers saying, what do you think of the prospect of ATVs and UTVs on our city roads? A few people have shared their opinion with me unsolicited. I didn't ask them. They sought me out and said, I don't like this, all three of them. Of the other probably 12, 15 or so people, I have yet to find one who supports it.
Well,
And I'm sure they are out there. I'm sure they are out there. We've had several that have come here and are continue to show up here. But for me, though, it has been almost to a person. People are not in favor of it that I've talked to or have sought me out.
I have almost the vice versa experience. I have run into a couple that were opposed. I've run to a lot that were pro the idea, and the ones that were caught in the middle, they said, well, what does it mean? I says, it means that a licensed driver with insurance on a motorized vehicle is going to be allowed to drive. And I explained to them that all the rules and conditions that they have to meet to be on our roads. And I would say the majority of them then said, well, then I'd have no problem with it.
I will just bring people back to the actual ordinance that is in front of you. And if there are other changes you want to see in the actual ordinance, now would be the time to talk about them. So we don't just discuss the merits of ATV use at this meeting, as we can do that when it comes before the council for action.
The parking one, just so I wrap my head properly around it, that does not stop you from, like, if you wanted to go to Frosty Freeze and have an ice cream, you could park in his parking lot. If you wanted to go downtown and have a burger at Fat Boys, you could park in the city's parking lot down there. As long as you can't leave it overnight, I get that.
Right, so what we changed was, before there was a prohibition of basically parking on any public property. You would have to park on private property, but the change to the ordinance provides an exception for parking. So except that operators may park ATVs and UTVs in public parking lots in accordance with the other parking requirements. So they can park on private property in a parking lot that's, Frosty Freeze. And yes, they could park in public lots.
Can they park on public city streets, like the marked parking areas as well, like a regular vehicle?
That was the intent, but let me just read and make sure that.
Okay.
I think just no overnight parking where it's on the street.
Right.
Overnight, I think is the only thing that was in there.
Yeah, so this section L is what we're referring to on page 5. And it says they can operate on paved surfaces unless yielding the right of way. They shall not operate in any public municipal property, public park, golf course, walking trail, public sidewalk, alley, or unpaved surface, or on any private property without permission of the property owner, except that they may park in public lots, and they would be able to park on the streets too. So this is trying to get at,
We're not doing donuts in Jones Park.
Right. And not parking on grass in and those types of things. So this particular section does not address on-street parking, which is permitted, just not.
They just follow every other car's rules.
And is the parking specific to other parking that you're talking about?
Okay.
You look down 2 more.
Okay, are there any other sections? I heard consensus on just removing that second recital. I heard consensus on keeping the age requirement at 18. And I heard consensus on changing the hours of operation to 10 PM to 5 AM, which can be debated further on the floor if the council, if certain council members want to make an amendment. Are there any other specific language items that the council would like to discuss?
I think I would at least strike the references where they should only be operated or shall not operate in a public golf course. Like I'm assuming that was picked up from some jurisdiction that has a golf course in its
Well,
community
I
and
think we're putting a big golf course in Banker Road, right?
yeah. So I would just delete that. And then I don't know under what page it may be on the newer one, but section 94, 158 that has the signage. Signs shall be maintained by the city. Some of the ordinances of the other jurisdictions that have these in place spell out that there's a funding source for it. Or who's
So that's the second
Did-
or the third whereas on the front does say, whereas local ATV, UTV clubs have volunteered to provide funds to the city to pay for appropriate signage. And the city will accept such donations to use funds to install signage in the manner and location city staff deem necessary to implement this ordinance.
okay, that one was added since we last,
Yes.
yes, all right,
Yes,
thank you.
so we did, city staff wanted to maintain control over the signs, where they're located,
Right.
what they look like, et
Yeah.
cetera. I mean, those are standard basically, but we wanted to maintain control over that, but the certain clubs did say that they would donate funds to
Okay.
pay for those.
All right.
The Half Mile Club told me they had $2,500 already set aside for signage use for the city. And that was just one club.
That's good to know. One item, I was wondering if we could look at addressing, just because it's come up in discussion over and over again. We require 4 or more tires, obviously. We've talked a lot about the type of tire. I think it would be hard to specify. I imagine it would be hard to specify a specific type of required tire because I know there's so much variety in the type that you can put on these vehicles, but I don't know if we could, but this is just thinking off the top of my head, because I know there's a safety concern. Can we require that those tires have to at least be in good repair? Is having like bald tires on a vehicle like a citable offense?
For a traffic car, road legal vehicle, yes, there are requirements for tread depth.
So that would essentially already be required if
That's for street legal automobiles.
that's just for automobiles.
And that's why we referenced all those state statutes that require things. So we've got statutes for motor vehicles, we've got statutes for, or we've got ordinances for motor vehicles. This would be the ordinance for ATVs and UTVs. And then, so we're adopting the state statutes that are included in that.
So essentially that would be covered already.
No, the ones that we're adopting are outlined in this ordinance, right?
Yeah.
So we're not adopting, there's not one. I don't believe any of these include, a tire tread depth.
It would be easy to say no slicks. That would be
I guess I'm wondering, is there language we could put in there then that somehow addresses that? Or is there a state statute that we can include as being covered under this ordinance possibly?
Let's see. Let's see, 347.45. Is tire equipment for motor vehicles in state statutes.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot on this.
Yeah, I mean, so there's statutes here. I'm not. We would have to, I think David Westrick would have to do, we'd have to do a little bit of research just to make sure that it's legal that we would to adopt something additionally. But I don't know exactly how helpful that. Let's see.
I think there's a statute that defines the depth of the tire tread. So we could model it after the auto language.
Yeah, I just don't know what statute it is off the top of my head, and I'm just looking, this is a annotated version of the traffic laws, so
Yeah, I don't either, but it certainly could be addressed and that could be added.
I guess I would appreciate if staff could research that and if it could be included in the draft ordinance.
Is there consensus on that amongst the council to include something relating to depth
Section,
of tire tread? It would mirror what is required for
state section
vehicles.
305.32 refers to the tire tread depth.
I would be fine with you adding something like that.
Me too. I mean, if there's a clear way to define what is and what is not in or out of the rule, I would be fine with that.
According to that, every tire shall have at least 2 32 inch tread depth in every major tire groove measured at 2 points no less than 15 inches apart.
I'd be
So
fine
that's a
with that
pretty-
language too, if that's already someplace in state statute.
We will find it and add it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Some of the other ordinances surrounding us spell out areas where you cannot operate. And I don't know whether that's, I don't know enough about the local geography to know why some of those areas may be excluded. But is that something that we should consider? Are there areas within this city that we would want to leave out?
As far as, I mean, you have the staff recommendation, right? We do not recommend moving forward at this time. However, if the city council does approve an ordinance to allow ATV, UTV use, staff generally thinks that it would be easier for enforcement purposes to either do all or nothing, right? So it's all the streets or it's no streets. So prohibiting certain sections of the city, I mean, certainly it can be done. We would just need to understand which ones. And it also requires a lot of additional signage.
It does. It absolutely
When you
does.
start prohibiting them on certain places.
Right.
Well, I think the Councilman Lessler was bringing up a good point, and this is actually something I had thought about as well, because I had noticed that certain communities did exempt certain streets. Looked like in some instances they were more like industrial areas, but like I haven't heard from any of our industrial employers that they don't necessarily want these vehicles driving through those areas. Maybe there were other safety concerns.
I think like Jefferson, they got North Main Street from Perner Avenue out, or Perner Street, that goes out past the trailer park. But they did that partially because Watertown Road does follow along parallel,
Okay,
and it does turn to 45 shortly out after you get past that intersection.
so they were basically just directing ATV traffic to a different road.
Yep.
Essentially, okay. I don't think unless I hear a specific reason, I personally don't think that's something we need to look at.
I'd prefer to just be open, that we'd make it a little easier on Chief Bump with the number of stops he'd have to do with people who didn't know any better when they did it.
Right, but I would assume that those that have put some exception or exemptions or prohibited streets where you can't drive on, like there is a reason, perhaps safety, I'm not sure. So I wouldn't want to just discount the fact that there might be some areas that just does not make sense.
Is-
I mean, I'm looking at the village of Johnson Creek. So they are closed in certain areas. Now, again, I don't know the geography there well enough to know why you would include that, but there are a couple, as I was looking through these, that does call out areas. Now, I understand that with signage, that would require some issues. It might make it difficult, but if there is a good reason for it and safety is one of the good reasons, then I don't know if that's
Is-
something that we would want to consider.
Is that something that midterm of the sunset we could bring back and request for a street to be exempted then?
Sure.
So within a month or two in, we start seeing a problem at certain roadways majorly.
I think there's a problem if you start limiting certain streets with making sure that, well, the signage is there and what was there. I mean, the first street that would come to mind would be Main Street during traffic congestion problems down there. But at that point in time, do you reroute all UTV traffic onto Robert Street Bridge and think that that makes the problem better, or does that make the problem worse on Robert Street Bridge? Because it sees plenty of traffic too. Or is there certain hours a day where you can't go from one side of town to the other without leaving town?
Yeah, I think the city of Jefferson's ordinance says that the police department can temporarily close any route whenever conditions require closure. I don't know if we have, I don't know if we have.
I believe we have that as well.
Section J.
This talks about during special events.
Yeah, but not necessarily for
I thought we had that in here. Hold on.
And maybe I misunderstood it, but it just struck me like if we had a parade, we were allowing them on in the parade if we chose to. Maybe I'm not reading it right.
No, that was what J was for the special events, but I had thought that we had put something in here about the police chief closing routes if.
Doesn't the police chief already have the authority to limit vehicular traffic in certain situations? If there was an emergency or,
Yeah, we can block roads or close roads.
Whether it's UTVs or regular cars, correct?
I can't picture a time where we would say UTVs no, but cars okay. I can't think of
Right.
what that scenario would be.
Right, so I think under your authority, under your existing authority, there's a comfort level as to, you know, if you had to restrict a route or a road,
It would be for everybody because of safety reasons.
right?
what about the there were still some issues of whether things are enforceable or not. And one of them that I had from our past discussion was proof of insurance and registration. And is that something that's enforceable? Have you gotten any further clarification on that in the last?
It is enforceable to require with our ordinance. So our ordinance can be more restrictive, just not less restrictive. So when we start talking about, you know, allowing a certain vehicle to travel on the roadway and requiring insurance, that is within your ability to draft an ordinance as long as it's a vehicle that can obtain insurance for roadway travel. Which it's my understanding that there are some insurance companies that will insure an ATV, UTV for specific to roadway travel, is my understanding. I talked to American Family and they said they will insure. But then you have other companies that say we don't do that, we don't offer that insurance.
I just want to make one other point of something I've heard about a fear of youth driving these things to school. Is that in the purview of the city or the purview of the school system? I mean, can the city tell you can't? Or is it more of the purview of a school system saying this is disruptive and we don't want these in our lots, you can't bring one here?
I would assume the school district has the right to make restrictions on school property as they see fit. So they could draft something if they wanted to as a policy.
That's it. And they could do it easily by going, this is a pain, let's put an end to it.
We have the ability under state statute to enforce certain traffic laws on school property. as long as the signs are appropriate as well. So like a stop sign on, at the high school. As long as it's a real stop sign, not a miniature stop sign, we have the authority to enforce that as if it's on a highway. So there are variations that go either direction based on what you're asking.
That does bring up a point. Senior year, there's a lot of kids that turn 18. So that this ordinance does not stop kids unless the school district does say, hey, no ATVs allowed to park on our facilities.
Yeah, I think no matter what, you're gonna have, the school district may have to
Address that.
identify, what they're comfortable with.
Are we aware of any community that's having an issue with that? That kids are showing up at school and they had to draft something to stop it? Or that they're unhappy with the fact that it's happening, or has been no problem?
I couldn't answer that. I don't.
I just think we have to stay in our lane. I mean, the school
Mhm.
district has a right to regulate their facilities, and I mean. If the school district were to make a specific request of the city, I think that would be one thing to consider, but I don't believe they've made any request related to this, so.
You can draft an ordinance that will help reduce the potential for things like that to occur and lessen the amount that it would occur to a point where the school district might not have to worry about it.
I mean, aside from the age, then the time.
Yeah, time
Right.
and age are your two things you have that you could include in the ordinance. Which is what Jefferson did with 8 PM. With that original 8 PM, that was the spirit behind why they chose that 8 PM, is because they wanted it to be not start until after the school day started.
I'm just gonna make one last comment while we're all in like open session, we're allowed to talk with one another. I have had residents come and say they didn't like this idea, or didn't want ATVs on city streets. But as I try to probe and understand like the why, a lot of it started off was ATV UTVs are dangerous, loud, and they act inappropriately and whatnot. And like that to me, I think is a false assumption or just like a bias. I understand from a staff position, I would expect you to have a vehement position one way or another. But like if someone said, hey, it's loud, well, then that's a noise problem, not an ATV problem. If it's, they're going to drive it over my front lawn. Well, that's like a vehicle, that's a disorderly conduct or trespassing. That's not a ATV UTV problem. I guess I'm trying to approach this with, an open of a mind as I can and try to dispel some of the mistruths or biases behind individuals' positions. Like if a kid wants to drive, if a 16-year-old, I guess hypothetically wants to drive a vehicle to school, I don't understand what part of that is bad. Is it that we expect them to speed? Is that we expect them to drive over the school's lawn? Is it that I think those are just biases that I can't hold or ascribe to. So I guess I just want to move forward, like understanding like why do we have certain beliefs or positions, and try to, craft the ordinance based like, if I think they're going to be loud, then we should have something that says they can't be loud, or it should apply under some other ordinance or law or rule saying you can't, do whatever with your vehicle.
I see people doing dumb things with their vehicles regardless of their age or type or whatever. So I agree. I mean, I think. In summary, I guess my position is that, my original concerns with this were the safety issues. I think the draft ordinance, I want to say city staff, I think, has done a good job with the draft ordinance. It does address a lot of the safety concerns that I have had. I don't want to get hung up on resident feedback, because this is not a referendum. At the end of the day, it's our job as council members to decide and vote. That's why we were elected, but I've had residents come up to me and be both in favor and against allowing this. I've had some business owners say they're for it. I have not had any say they're against it. I'm sure they're out there, but at the end of the day, I think, you know, we have to put forward the best ordinance that we think we can, and we're gonna have a vote and it'll either pass or it won't pass. I think though we've had very good discussions here, they've been very respectful, and we have tried to take into account differences of opinion in a fair way. So I've appreciated that about this process.
And I kind of like down the same path as Mr. Schultz. Perspective is a lot to me. All the things they can say, well, a UTV and an ATV could do XXXX, and it's all bad. I could do XXX with my pickup. If Chief Bump don't catch me, I could do all of those things.
Well, but your pickup was intended to be used on city streets.
That doesn't mean I don't take it off-road.
That's true. So, yeah, and for me, it's just been almost everyone, it's the safety concern is what they cite, those who have shared their opinion with me. And then and then loudness. Are they loud? If you've sat on the corner at a hamburger stand in Jefferson and seen some drive by, they're louder than a car. Are they louder than a certain motorcycle? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know.
I
But,
doubt it.
but it's the safety concern. And then with respect to somebody driving on someone's lawn, I think it was one of the DNRs, some site on the DNR brochure or something I went to, and it had the top 10 ATV, UTV violations, and there was in no particular order. It was operating while intoxicated, operating on private or public property without permission, illegal operation on or near highways. This doesn't get at the ordinance, but the violations are happening. I mean, we'd be crazy to think that they weren't going to happen here. I mean, perhaps some of us have seen one of these machines operating on city streets over the summer and prematurely operating and you know, forced to
think-
look the other way. So the violations are, they're real, they're happening.
Chief
Doesn't
Bump,
matter
do you
what
have,
it's like.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just gonna ask Chief Bump if you've had experience this year, so far this year with ATVs operating illegally in city parks or
Yes, we have violations from time to time, some recently, some that have caused damage to our city parks. Driving through neighborhoods, some doing, if they were in the neighboring township, they'd be fine, but others doing things that are completely illegal, no matter what the standard or ordinance is. So it is occurring in the city already. And you talk about, Mr. Schultz, you talk about like, well, we just have to have a good ordinance and, you know, then we won't have these issues, but you'll still have the issues. Now you're just putting in place an ordinance that allows more things to occur, and then you look to your police department to take care of it. So you add more onto our plate and our shoulders on top of it, when without the ordinance, it's a bigger preventer of a lot of those things from occurring. And it prevents us from having to deal with it as often. We still deal with it, but maybe not as often as we're gonna have to if you pass an ordinance. So I know it's gonna add a burden to our police force too. Because we're already seeing the violations and it's not even legal yet.
I mean, your question was directed at specifically to, have you had instances with ATVs or UTVs doing bad things in town? And the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Have you also had instances with people using roadworthy vehicles to do the same type of bad things?
Absolutely. That's one of the.
It's
things that we
to
deal
me
with.
perspective. It doesn't gonna change. If you're gonna be irresponsible, you're gonna be irresponsible.
Yeah,
you
we're
know.
just giving irresponsible people another opportunity with a new device to do more things,
I
which
will,
isn't good for us.
would point out too, this weekend I noticed, I follow the Koshkanon group on Facebook. And they had an instance of a four-wheeler doing some stuff on Hackbarth and surrounding areas.
Yeah,
And they did kind of reach out, the group themselves jumped down on the people, which I think that's a big thing with the community, the group involvement. You'll have that to aid.
Yeah, I'm sure 90% of the people who take advantage of these ordinances in these communities are doing it in a safe manner, because you kind of have to be safe, right?
Mhm.
So I'm not worried about that, but that 10% of people that don't take the time to educate themselves about the ordinances and what they're doing, if it's legal or not, and doing things they think are legal but are super illegal and unsafe. Those are the things that concern me. I mean, I have pictures of people driving past my house in the city. A lady with no helmet, wearing shorts and flip flops with a 1-year-old toddler sitting in front of her with no helmet, eye protection, in a diaper and a t-shirt and no shoes on. And I mean, there's multiple illegal things about that. So like those things concern me definitely. Oh, and yeah. Go
It
ahead.
brings up a really good point. And I don't know if I understand we're getting close to time. I understand like some ATV, UTVs don't have windscreens, don't have windshields. You don't need to wear a helmet if you're over the age of 18. But I don't know if I saw anything explicitly saying that you should have some sort of like eye protection. Where at least that's,
I don't know if that's a requirement under DNR even. I don't think there's any eye protection requirement.
yeah, I know it is like for motorcycles, like you can't ride a motorcycle, without eye protection. I don't know if that's something that we need to look at to add in, or from a safety perspective, I wouldn't want someone getting beat in the eye with a
June bug.
insect or 35 miles an hour.
Something I hadn't thought of, to be honest. I can't imagine you'd want to ride one of those and not be wearing some kind of glasses. I can just,
I wouldn't think I would want to either.
I know there is the provision in the motorcycle, if we could kind of reference that. Wouldn't be a bad idea. So I know it talks that you have to either have such a high windshield above the handlebars or safety glasses.
if there is something to reference, I'd be fine putting that in. It's probably a good idea.
We'll look for something.
Are you satisfied with the information you've gotten?
Yep, I am.
Has the council got more to discuss? Or are we satisfied we've beat this horse to death?
Thank you for indulging me.
Devin, you always impress me with your astuteness and your diligence with your research. You impress me always.
Thank you.
I move to adjourn.
Second,
This meeting is adjourned.
thank you.